on two issues. The first one is the emergency situation in the energy sector, and the second one is the emergency situation with the state finance. We need to live through the year with an incredibly high level of our debt, but before that we have to live through the winter. The winter is going to be very tough. The war criminal Putin has not changed his plans, except for military plans to capture Ukraine. Another part of his plan is to freeze Ukraine. He hopes that he can freeze the Ukrainian people. He will never be able to freeze a will for victory. And for us to win, we need to mobilize our capabilities and resources and to go through this winter. First of all, I would like to thank the workers of our energy sector, especially the tech company and the entire energy sector of Ukraine, for having lived through several winters already, and we will live through this one as well. But how this is to be done, and this is something we're going to discuss here today. The second issue is about the state finance. 2/3 of our budget goes for defense, and for the next year, so far, we don't have a sufficient level of funding. That is why we hope for the support of our European friends, and I'm happy to welcome the ambassador of the EU to Ukraine, who is present here. We need to live through yet another year and to win in this war. I'd like to address our allies in the US. Apart from the energy sector workers who have to do their homework and to provide us with energy, apart from the fact that the Russian sovereign assets should be a source to finance the Ukrainian state budget, and these funds will not be sufficient, even with the reparation loans, to cover for all the losses inflicted on us by Russia. But we have to understand that these assets should be given to us as a reparation loan. As regards our American friends, the decision on Tomahawks has been delayed. And this is not just about a military victory. The Tomahawk issue is another means of deterrent against Russia and against their strikes on our energy sector. We need long-range weapons for Russia to know that Ukraine will strike their energy and military facilities. Exactly what Putin is doing. What Putin is doing is a crime against humanity, because the bombardment of energy sector and infrastructure is covered by the category of war crimes and crimes against humanity. We are going to have two panels. The first one is on energy, and the second one will be opened by the head of the National Bank of Ukraine, and it will be about economy in general. I would like to invite Mr. Kharchenko. I give the floor to you, and please tell us how Ukraine is going to live through this winter. Thank you. Mr. Yatsenyuk.
Take your seats. Я тим часом зроблю два маленькі технічні.
In the meantime, I will make two technical announcements. Please, journalists, please do not do any streaming from geolocation. And the second one, if we have an alert, we'll go to the shelter and continue our discussion. I hope that is not going to be very difficult and we'll manage. Mr. Kobolyev, please take your seat on the panel, and we will start a discussion as to where we stand in terms of our energy sector. I'm sure that we will go through this winter. It's not going to be an it's not going to be apocalyptic, even though it will be tough. But there will be no apocalypses in our cities. I will address my questions to individual members of the panel. The first one is to Ms. Boyko, Deputy Head of the Board of Naftogaz of Ukraine. Nataliya, gas has been always a strategic issue during any winter. Will we have enough gas to go through this winter? Where do we stand technically in terms of gas production, and what are your projections for the future? Thank you. Well, the gas infrastructure is being attacked all the time. On last Friday, there was a combined attack on the Naftogaz facilities. Nevertheless, I can say definitely that we have enough gas in the storage. This is the amount that we had agreed with the government. This year, the production facilities are being attacked very intensively and very often, and in a most targeted manner. That's why we have lost a lot of our sources of extraction. That's why we developed a plan for additional import of gas. A lot of work has been done in that respect. We are buying a lot. We are trying to use internal and external sources. Last week, we signed another agreement for the purchase of LNG from the U.S., and we need additional funds and additional volumes of gas. And this is something we are discussing with our partners in the EU and in the U.S. The government is allocating 8.4 billion hryvnias for the purchase of gas. And so as far as gas is concerned, the situation is not as critical as it could have been, thanks to the assistance of our partners, apart from other things. A follow-up question as regards the Ukrainian production of gas, how to resume it, and within what time frame can this resumption happen? I wouldn't like to share any time frames with you or projections, because after the first huge attack last winter, we have basically returned all the facilities into the system. We can discuss the quality of gas, because we lost a lot of facilities of ensuring the quality of the gas. But the volume which we returned into the system was fantastic, which means that people at the local level did a tremendous job. After that, huge attacks resumed. Our workers work around the clock, but our facilities are being ruined time and time again. But given all that, I think that we're coping well. But the intensity with which the Russians are striking since early October is very difficult, and alerts last for hours during the day and during the night, and the processes are largely unpredictable. That's why our teams of our sector work to the maximum and do their work very qualitatively.
But I would like to praise them not for this. I would like us to work on the normal development of Ukrainian gas production. And I would like to see the increase of private production of gas. We would like to speak not about terms of innovation, but about further development. Thank you. And a similar question to Dmytro Sakharuk, Director General of D.TRADING, representing D.TECH. I think that everybody understands that D.TECH is an expert in generation, distribution, and networks of electricity. What's the situation with this? How will we go through the winter? Good morning. I think that people learn about the situation from the news, and I will say nothing new, because over the last 2 or 3 weeks we observe increase of the attacks and increase of various missiles, drones, and so on. Also, they started already attacking distribution networks, substations of 110 and 135 kilovolts. These are on the territories which are neighboring to the front line or to Russian Federations, Chernihiv, Kharkiv, Sumy, and other regions. Also, we see that, unfortunately, the amount of losses which we suffer is quite substantial. I will repeat, it's the same with the gas. All the experts, all the people from all energy companies and networks are working hard on bringing back those capacities which have been damaged to work. Now situation is complicated by the fact that the resource of the equipment which we had before the war is depleted, and therefore the weak point is not only the time which we need to restore production, but also the equipment which we need to bring back to work physically. And we are looking for such equipment in the countries which used such equipment before. It's like countries which were before were under the influence of the Soviet Union, like Greece, Croatia, Romania, and some other countries where they still use this old Soviet-style equipment. The quickest alternative would be to bring this equipment to our country. Even if it is not operational, we are able to repair it. And here the cooperation with our partners from Europe is a key one for them to help us to reach those companies in those companies. Often these are not only public companies, these are private companies, and we need support in this area, definitely. The second sphere is funding for restoring the production and distribution, not only from the side of the companies, but also from our partners who would help us. And the third are the people who have been working for 4 years in a row in order to install this equipment when we get it. And the second, one more component is the effectiveness of restoration depends on how we are able to protect, to defend our installations. I'm talking about serious systems because of the last 2 or 3 attacks were combined attacks by ballistic missiles, not just cruise missiles. Some of our stations were hit by 5 or 6 ballistic missiles during the last attack. So in view of all these facts and situation, I believe that any company will do maximum possible in order to go through this winter without minimum losses. The question is how well we are able to get together, to collaborate, to maintain our system and to not allow Russians to implement their plans. It's not a secret that distribution companies, which this year became the big target for missile attacks, don't have funds, don't have much funds. And don't you feel that the central public authorities or regulators are looking for opportunities to support the distribution companies to find new resources in order to procure new equipment and to create a reserves for these companies' distribution. The question is how much money is invested into the energy in general, not into the distribution companies. Over the 4 years of war, the tech company belonging to Rinat Akhmetov, we invested 78 billion hryvnias, 1.9 billion euros. Where we invested into 30 billion we invested into restoration of heat and power stations and development of coal production. We also invested into the battery storage and illegal power electric station. 14 billion we invested into gas production and 15 into networks, into grids. So this means that we should invest into all segments of the system. Then the system would be resistant and sustainable. Therefore, the distribution grid or distribution networks is a part of a system into which the money should be invested. And here the regulators understand us. But the grid without generation, without batteries, without green generation or solar, without heat generation will not function properly. That's why we need to think on the complex approach to the energy development. Thank you. My next question will be to Volodymyr GROYSMAN, Prime Minister of Ukraine in 2016-2019. Volodymyr, we know each other for many years, and I understand very well that you are one of the most knowledgeable person on what's going on in communities currently in Ukraine. How this situation, which is happening at the national level, this massive attacks against energy system, how in this situation the local communities understand their role in energy securing, including their own responsibility in helping people not to suffer from all these problems. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Arseniy. Yes, you said correctly that we know each other for a long time. I remember 2014 when we worked together. Then I was a vice prime minister, and that time I was taking care at the beginning of war of Russia against Ukraine about energy. When some capacities we lost. That time, with American partners, following the decision by the government led by Mr. Yatsenyuk and American partners, we set up a staff headquarters where we discussed how to work in a situation of occupation of our energy capabilities. But that was a different time. Now we face unprecedented attacks. It's not just a war. The very word war is terrible, but in our case, it's a terror. It's terroristic activities, and the aim of our enemy, named Putin and his henchmen, is to liquidate Ukrainians, exterminate Ukrainians. They attack all our energy system, heat and power producing facilities, everything which brings warmth and energy to our people. And people all over Ukraine feel how difficult it is now. But I'm sure that in spite of the difficulties, we will survive and pass through this winter. And I think we'll become stronger because what is now being done by Ukrainian armed forces in terms of repelling attacks is unprecedented.
For the recent history, nobody has dealt with such barbaric military attacks, and what our military and our air force and ground forces are doing at the front line is extremely commendable and worthy of respect and support from all the Ukrainians. As regards the energy workers, what they are doing is unprecedented. Nobody else has been doing this before. I mean, how to recover the system under constant bombardments and strikes, missile strikes, and we know that their performance is really great. They recover our facilities, and this is titanic work. I was impressed by what was said about the investment of private capital. 2 billion euros is what is being invested by businesses to recover our energy system, and the private business has not been daunted. They pool their efforts and work as a team to keep the situation operational. The key issue here is air defense, and obviously what President Zelensky is saying during each of his speeches and each of the meetings he has with our international partners. And this basically has been going on since 2022. He asks them, please cover our skies, close the skies over Ukraine, because this affects the livelihood of Ukrainians. But unfortunately, we see that very little progress has been done in this respect. And we don't have time to wait for the European decisions in that respect for too long, or the United States. I don't understand what makes Ukraine so different from Israel, for instance. When Iran started attacking Israel, the coalition took into the air and bombed Iran. So I think that a similar decision is long overdue as regards Ukraine. In this respect, I believe that this kind of decision should have been made long ago, to at least to close part of the skies over Ukraine, or to strengthen our air defense. As regards your question concerning communities, the energy system from bottom to top, from top to end consumers, is specific, and what should have been done in communities is the development of joint plans of response. What we do if there's a blackout, what do we do if there's no gas supply, if there's no water supply. Each region, each community should have a clear-cut plan of contingency, how to provide these resources for high-rise buildings, how to transport people if need be, and so on. And I believe that we should analyze which communities have done this and which communities are still lacking behind. Everyone should know what they should do in emergency, how people should work with relevant equipment, with power generators and so on. These are very down-to-earth issues, but anyway, all this system should be operating like clockwork at the level of communities and individual people. At the level of energy companies, everything has been decided. They know how to go about it, how to recover the system. And I'm sure that we will survive this winter, no matter how hard the enemy is trying to destroy us. We will survive, and we will emerge even stronger. Thank you very much. And next speaker, Andriy Kobolyev, head of the board of Naftogaz previously, and now he works at Enei company, which invests in energy sector. Mr. GROYSMAN said that there's a need for additional sources of power to cover at least the critical infrastructure once a city is cut off the unified energy system of Ukraine. And Andriy, you work in private sector, which is engaged in these issues. What's your take as to what is going on in this sector? Well, I have experience of working for a state-run company and private one. When I worked for the state-run company, I always understood that the speed with which private companies can go ahead is much faster than state-run because they are more flexible, more nimble. Private companies normally are more operational in this respect. And now when we speak about decentralization of generation sources and setting up an alternative to the system which we inherited from the Soviet times, when we have large-scale facilities and huge and very powerful transmission grids. But now the need is to set up smaller facilities, which would be more survivable in terms of generation, transmission, and so on. These facilities can be set up faster by private businesses. Therefore, the support for private businesses in terms of permits, funding, and simplification of the procedure is really key. The lawmakers have done a lot to make this happen, for these companies to be more operational and more efficient. And it is much more difficult to oppose our private business for our enemy in Kremlin. And I think that private operators will add to companies like D.TRADING a huge portion of our support for our power, electric power, and gas system. How realistic is to implement practical projects? You probably monitor projects in this sector. What is the key requirement now to make sure that individual projects in individual regions would be scaled up in terms of their scale and in terms of their number? Well, the first thing, what is necessary in the energy sector. For instance, now we are working on the system of electric power storage. We need to focus on a whole set of issues of our market to make this market more attractive to investors. For instance, through the issues of accounts on balancing markets, because basically now we have one part which can be monetized and the other one which is very unclear in terms of how to monetize it. And therefore it scares off a lot of private investors. I know a lot of Western companies who analyze their future business plans, and they say, what is this? These are the profits from the balancing market. And they say, well, we'll wait until this problem is resolved, and then maybe we will come. We have the DFC agency present in our sector, and they underwrite certain risks. And when we spoke about the balancing markets with them, they still are unclear of what is going on in this sector. And therefore, a lot of loans for us are pretty much under question because people don't understand how it all operates. We need more clarity and predictability in this. Another aspect here is the need to change the paradigm in our relations with the operators of the system. They are very overloaded now, and they're quite flexible, but I believe that if people had more leeway for decision-making to depart from standard decisions and not to be punished for this, because currently now we still have this hangover from the post-Soviet times that people experiment with something, it doesn't work out, and people get punished. For instance, now we have to test a huge array of equipment, and if you have to channel all this through the state-run companies, it's very cumbersome and time-consuming. As regards gas, DFC coming to the mineral substances of Ukraine is very prospective, very promising, because there are projects for shale gas, and they require new technologies, new opportunities, new incentives. Everyone wants to cooperate with private companies in that respect. If we manage to open up the window for private companies on the market of shale gas, and if these licenses start to operate, this will change the picture radically, because we have Western Ukraine, we have shale oil as well, and the prospects there is very huge. We can make a lot of money on that. We obviously would not be able to interest Trump with the scope of possible profits from natural resources in Ukraine. When people yell that we are going to have our natural resources stolen, this is senseless. But if we say that on his watch the Ukrainian shale gas revolution came to Ukraine, that would be a very good incentive for him, and that would give us a lot of strength during the negotiation processes with the U.S. Thank you. My next question is to the Ambassador of the EU to Ukraine, Ms. Katarína MATHERNOVÁ. Your Excellency, our discussion has come to the point that the best response to the attacks we experience can be shown by private companies, private businesses, because they are more flexible, even in terms of generation. The state-run companies during the years of the war introduced about 230 megawatt capabilities, but the private ones has introduced twice as much. And I am not even talking about wind. I'm primarily talking about gas-run stations and batteries. Therefore, the private business is more efficient. But having said that, when I see it, how the assistance of the EU is focused, the main focus is put on the state sector. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I believe some 90% of your resources are focused on the state-owned sector. And I think that private sectors are very hungry for additional instruments, like by way of insurance and so on, like what DFC is doing, or other forms of loans and credits. How hopeful can we be that Europe will take this into consideration? And what is your vision of further cooperation and integration of Ukraine's energy sector with that of the European Union? And thank you very much for having invited me to take part in this panel. Recently, at a panel on energy sector, it was said that we are all energy workers.
Even if the original job is different, and I want to give my hats off, as many of you have done, to the energy companies, the energy workers, and the incredible ability to repair in vnemovirnie terms. And I think that when this terrible war is over, the Ukrainian energy and building industry will be able to teach the whole world how to repair things quickly and effectively. So really, congratulations to that. As Prime Minister GROYSMAN mentioned, this is not a war. This is a terror on the energy system. And I'm afraid it's still only November. I'm afraid we are going to perhaps have harder times discussing the situation, because even if you had more PPO, there is always calibration for something, and we know there is one certainty in this war, that Putin will go further until he is stopped. So just wanted to say that it's really remarkable the way the energy system still stands. I know there are blackouts and rolling blackouts on a daily basis in most of the households, certainly in Kyiv and in many other places, but the tenacity and the determination to continue is really amazing. Now, as to your question, the EU has done roughly 3.2 billion euros in investments or support to the energy system from the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And indeed, it is true that some of it goes to the government. But in fact, the biggest instrument that we have and that we support is an instrument that is perfectly suited for the private sector. In fact, we work via our international financial institutions, EBRD, IFC, EIB, and a lot of their attention is indeed sucked by the state-owned enterprises. And that's why we are pushing, and this week, we will be in Warsaw at the Rebuilding Conference, where there is going to be specific attention paid to the private sector, because we have now lined up not only support to individual renewable energy and other energy sources. For example, I think it's a big wind park in Volyn. We have supported a number of other renewable energy projects, but we also have designed with EBRD a specific de-risking mechanism for the private sector. Is it enough? Absolutely no. Is it true that most of the support that we have done is sucked by the state-owned companies? Absolutely, because you have the grid is. The state-owned enterprises own the energy system, and it's the production that needs to feed into it that is decentralized and distributed. And those who have heard me talk 2 and 3 years ago, we were advocating for a distributed and decentralized energy sources from the very beginning. I think we have lost a little bit of time, quite a bit of time on that. I think that we could have been further, but I think that by now it's very clear to everybody that this is the future, to have, especially because of the terror that we experience, is to indeed invest in distributed energy. We have the investments, but we also need to support the grid. We also need to support the gas distribution center, and we do that. We have 2.1 gigawatts on a daily basis available through the connection of the Ukrainian and Moldovan grid with the continental one. We have recently signed over 900 million euros to Naftogaz for emergency purchases of gas. We also support the humanitarian aspect and the deliveries of equipment, etc. And I think what is very important is that the European Union Civil Protection Mechanism is the backbone of all the deliveries of all the various equipment that comes from not only Europe, other partners as well, and we deliver it to Ukraine. My favorite example is the power plant thermal power plant from Vilnius that we took apart piece by piece and deliver it piece by piece to Ukraine, and it's now is being used as an important source of spare parts. So I agree, more investment needs to go to the private sector, because I agree with Andriy's analysis, but we also cannot leave the state-owned companies and the backbone of the energy system without support. And I think one of you said it, maybe Dmytro said it very well. It's not either or. The problem, the attacks are such that one has to address gas and electricity and water and distribution and grid and sources. So it's a multi-dimensional chess that we all play, and my message is we are here. We look at energy as one of the really most important areas, and including our push for reforms, famously, but I will end with Volodymyr Borisovich's comment that we will survive also this winter.
Дуже дякую. Я повністю поділяю думку, що ми виживемо, але мені цікаво зараз було би...
I fully agree that we will survive this winter. I fully agree with you. But I would like to ask the next question to every speaker. But please speak within maximum 2 minutes in your answer. We will pass through winter from 1 to 10, according to this scale. 1 is bad, 10 is the best. And the second, which key things, in your opinion, should be done to go through this winter better than under any other scenario? Nataliya, the floor is yours first. I will begin with the second. And there is a topic on which I've been talking for many years, which is not always popular, but I think that we must aim society towards consumption which is very reasonable. Many people believe that electricity, gas, and heating is something given from above, and sometimes people think that it should be so warm in their houses that they could walk around in a T-shirt. It's from moral point of view very hard for me to hear. When I hear every morning during the meetings what was destroyed, what colleagues were killed as a result of the attack, and then hear from people in the beginning of October that it is very cold, I think this discussion of about free resource which should come to us from somewhere should be changed into the absolutely conscientious consumption. I worked in other countries, in Germany, in Austria, in Italy. I've never seen such attitude towards energy resources as we have in Ukraine. I think we should save energy and should turn this saving energy into a religion at the level of the country, for people to understand how to deal with this energy. And the second, I'm sure that with the development of Ukraine, the state will play a smaller role in energy. But energy is such a sphere in which very often the most difficult tasks like balancing the system or maintaining the basis of providing a population with gas is done by the state. And it's impossible to deviate from this model within one day. The recent example, when the big guarantees of the European Union where funds were aimed at locks and cranes. Unfortunately, the wind and sun and battery cannot fulfill this role. And I must say that we will still have to use this amount of load. And I like very much that I see the communities are very conscientious. I was born in Lviv and I'm living in Kyiv. My parents live in Lviv. And I think that the stronger the community is, the more responsibility it takes over itself on various issues. The more active would be every citizen in his or her community, in his or her country. And we need more active society, and every one of us should interact not only at work with the tasks on which we work, but also take decisions as a resident of a concrete multi-apartment building, for example. So in the short-term prospect, I understand all these things. About the assessment, it's a very subjective approach. I think that the graphs of blackouts we can tolerate. And I think that let's hope that this will be the maximum worst scenario. And Russians would not manage to get us into a long-term blackout. So what is called blackout now is not, in fact, a blackout. Thank you, Nataliya. The same question from 1 to 10, and 3 things which will help us to go through this winter in a better form. First of all, I am for private-public partnership. The state has really a big stake in the energy sector, and without the state and private sector, this issue cannot be resolved. It's about unification. It's about a result. If everybody works separately, there will not be a result. Only together we'll be able to get necessary result. This is a critical story. We should work together. We should not alienate. And we have individual interests, we have common interests, but they should be combined. The second, it's about determination and the permanent work every day. And maybe I should not repeat things which concern the results, but we have to invent something new. It's like our armed forces, which every day invent something new to hit the enemy. So in our sphere, we also should take decisions or think about decisions which may even look like something unrealistic.
Well, without batteries, we wouldn't be able to balance the system. Without the thermal generation, we would not have enough power. Without grids, we would not be able to transmit power to all the way down to the villages. But this is something we have to do right away, today. We're not foreigners, we live here. We cannot say, let's wait. No, we have to get down and do it. Well, these are the things which are key, absolutely, for us not just to go through next winter, but also to live on. Life will show how good we will be. From 1 to 10, Mr. GROYSMAN, from 1 to 10, what's your take? Well, if before that we were in top 10, I think that we will go through 10 to 1 and from 1 to 10 in different times. There will be different situations, but I'm sure that we will reach 10 when life comes back to normal. Well, obviously, we have to set up two energy systems. There should be a centralized and a decentralized system, which badly requires investments now. What I've heard from my colleagues shows me that we need to raise the issue of deregulation by way of urgency, getting rid of unnecessary bureaucracy and red tape and so on. The faster we do this, the more likely it will be that we'll be high on this scale of assessment from 1 to 10. Our enemies and our opponents abroad very often say that we are ungrateful. No, we are grateful. We're very much thankful, and I would like to use this opportunity to thank, in your person, Your Excellency. We would like to thank the EU. We would like to thank Ms. Ursula von der Leyen. I would like to thank President Trump and the U.S. for the support which we have and the support which we are going to have in the future. I hope it will be even bigger. The governments of Germany, France, Sweden, Poland. I wouldn't like to omit everyone who helps us. Thank you very much indeed. We are thankful, but Putin, by hundreds of his missiles and drones, shows to you what you do for Ukraine is not enough, because I can afford striking them more, and therefore this assistance should be even higher. But anyway, we are thankful for whatever we receive. Thankful very much. And the main generator of our hope comes from Ukrainians, those who are at the front line, those who are killing the enemy, those who are recovering our energy system and doing everything possible for Ukraine to live on. And I'm sure that we will make it, and we will emerge even stronger than we are. We will be within this 10 points. Andriy, what's your take on where we will stand on this scale from 1 to 10? And three more things which have not been mentioned yet, which would help us go through this winter. Well, as regards my assessment, any assessment is very relative. We are in a war against the second army in the world, and this is the fourth year. If we take this as a baseline for assessment and compare what would have happened in this situation to some countries of NATO, this will bring us to the conclusion that we are doing quite well. And for this, we have to thank the people who are working on recovery in Ukraine and our partners who are supporting us in this. I can think of several countries of Europe who, after this kind of strikes that we've suffered, they would have had absolutely nothing. That would be just an even field where everything is razed to the ground. So we are doing well, and I'm sure that we will go through this winter well. As regards my advice, we've spoken a lot about generation and storage and about large-scale companies, but we very often omit what is related to consumers. Consumers can regulate their consumption, and if we take a look at the efficiency measures in the energy sector, the most efficient one would be the limitation or a decrease in consumption. And many reforms in the gas sector in 2014 resulted from the fact that we managed to reduce the consumption. I totally agree with what Nataliya said. One person told me, well, I like to go about in shorts in my apartment and in a T-shirt. And I tell him, get real, man. I was abroad, and nobody abroad affords themselves this kind of luxury. But in our country, it's the other way around. And people are even proud that they go about in shorts and T-shirts in their apartments. We have to switch to what is called prosumer, which means a consumer which is efficient and thriftful. Very little is being said about this, because when we go through election cycles very often, and people very often resort to populism and promise things which are not realistic. So I would like to advise that we should orient ourselves to prosumers as opposed to consumers. And they can modify their consumption through smart control, through their connection with Ukrenergo, getting money for their energy, economizing on energy, and by other sets of incentives to economize on the use of energy. So we shouldn't say that ordinary Ukrainians do not understand what it's all about. No, ordinary Ukrainians hold this system on their shoulders for the 4th year, and if we give them enough tools to limit their consumption, the efficiency will be considerable. This is an area in which we are very weak. Thank you. Andriy, I recall the so-called warm loans of 2015 through providing energy-efficient windows and so on. We all understand what the reduction of power consumption is all about, and they know how this can make a difference. Your Excellency, what is your vision of the energy sector in Ukraine this winter? And what would be your 3 points? I wouldn't even say pieces of advice, but we would like to hear from you how the 3 points as to how Ukraine can come closer to the EU and get integrated more deeply in the European area.
If you allow me, I will share the optimism of at least the speakers that we will be okay at the end of the winter. It's not going to be easy. I think there is going to be disruptions, but eventually we'll be okay. Now, I'm smiling because the panel turned into a déjà vu for me, because Prime Minister Groysman will remember the energy one put into the energy efficiency project and into pushing for the idea of renovation, and it started as a fantastic project with a huge take-up and results, and that's when the full-scale invasion happened. So I very much agree that there needs to be push and stimulus to people, to individuals, firms, etc., to actually continue with saving energy, and I don't think it's happening sufficiently. So that's one area. And the second thing, which was another obsession of ours, and want to reflect on it because both of you talked about it, and that's the role of the gromadas and local administration in both stimulating distributed energy production and also preparing for emergencies. I think that one of the greatest advantages of this country has been the decentralization reform and the fact that there is the ability to self-organize. And I have gone through many parts of the country, and everybody was telling me that in February 2022, the reaction would not have been such if it wasn't for the decentralization. So just wanted to make those comments before we end. And the last bit, you asked me about integration into the EU. By the way, congratulations for a very good enlargement report last week. the reforms need to continue as difficult as they are. And I realize that the easier bit has been done. There are going to be some very difficult nuts to crack. For example, public service obligations, etc., are not easy to deal with in a state of war. But there is now the energy integration package, the market coupling with the EU that would help with the energy integration and the future build-up of the energy system more. So I think you will, colleagues will continue to be annoyed by us in pushing for these reforms, even if we realize that some of them will only be able to be implemented when the Marshall Plan is over. Thank you.
На цьому ми будемо завершувати панель. Я дуже дякую, пані послу, я дуже дякую всім учасникам.
On this we will conclude this panel. I thank all the speakers. My final point, people, don't be afraid of wearing sweaters in your apartments. Plus 19 in your apartment is good temperature and it's good for your health. Don't be afraid of it. Thank you very much. We conclude this panel on time. So we go on the extraordinary session on the Kyiv Security Forum. Please take your seats. Now we will have an opportunity to listen to the head of the National Bank of Ukraine, Mr. Andriy Pyshny. We very often forget to say thank you to people who do a great deal of work for our country. And during the previous panel on energy, we said thank you to energy workers who do an incredibly great job in terms of providing power to the people. All these people are worthy of our respect. Of course, this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for our military who repels the enemy forces at the front line. But the fact that within the country there are people who can organize our resistance in the rear is incredible. I'd like to tell you a few words about the head of the National Bank of Ukraine, Andriy Pyshny. In an unprecedented manner in 2023, the Central Bank of Ukraine became the best national bank of Europe. In 2024, head of the National Bank also received an award as the head of the best national bank. Even though I was the head of the National Bank myself, and I wasn't awarded, unfortunately, but I cannot recall that such a recognition of the operation of the National Bank was afforded. That is why I would like to thank, in the person of Mr. Pyshny, all those who work at the National Bank and all the financial sector people at the government of Ukraine for having preserved the financial, economic, price-related and exchange rate-related stability in the country, which is engaged in a war against the Russian military machine armed to the teeth. So, Mr. Pyshny, the floor is yours.
Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you for invitation. Your words, thank you very much for them. We have different levels of cooperation, very good level of cooperation of the NBU and the government team. This is a separate topic I like to talk about when I speak on the stage in telling how we managed to maintain macrofinancial stability for nearly 4 years. The foundation is good relation with the finance ministry, with the government, with the Ministry of Economy. This is respect to the mandate of the National Bank. This is understanding of shared responsibility. The NBU has never, for the past 3 years, felt itself in the ivory tower. The level of cooperation allowed us to resume the operation of domestic debt market, to avoid monetary finance, and to achieve historical results in the progress of integration to the European Union. Therefore, your recognition, I can share it with the finance minister, with the prime minister, with the former one, with the current one, with the minister of economy. This is a teamwork. I will move to the essence of the issue, which is the subject of this conference. Energy security has become the new definition of sovereignty. It is measured not only in megawatts, but also in the ability of the country, businesses and citizens to stay resilient in face of ongoing threats. Energy security is more than just a technical term today, it's a condition for survival. Not of a separate industry, not for business, but for the entire country. We live in times when electricity is not just light and heat, but also defense. Not just the economy, but also faith. And when the enemy attacks our thermal power plants, it tries to attack our resilience and strike us at the very heart. Not for the first time, and unfortunately not for the last time. The National Bank sees this reality and takes it into account in its forecasts and decisions. At the end of October, we revised our assumptions regarding the electricity deficit upward. In this quarter, up to 4%. On average for the year, about 1.3%. In 2026, 3%. Of course, these are just technical assumptions necessary to develop our forecast, while actual results and intensiveness of attacks cannot be projected. But these are not figures of fear. These are figures of responsibility. They help us and the government to realistically assess risks and make responsible decisions. Yes, the consequences of attacks are unpredictable, but it is clear that they are constraining the economic recovery. And therefore, we lowered our real GDP growth forecast to 1.9% in 2025 and to 2% in 2026. The inflation in the NBU forecast will be 9.2% this year, 6.6% next year, and 5% at the end of 2027. Could these numbers be worse? Definitely yes. However, there is a range of factors that differ us dramatically from ourselves in 2022. I will give 3 of them. First, unique experience and phenomenal adaptability. We are the country that learned to take a punch. According to the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, 80% of businesses are prepared to power cuts. They have generators, alternative power sources. In October, electricity import increased 2.5 times in just 1 month. Businesses that hardly survived in 2022 are now operating and growing. As a nation, we have learned to live in the state of permanent risk and not to lose our resilience. In Washington, Kristalina Georgieva during the annual meeting said, "Today, the global world lives at the intersection of anxiety and resilience, and it is resilience that saves against falling." These words are about Ukraine. We are not just an example of endurance, we are a synonym of it. Resilience is not an abstract ideal, said Piero Cipollone, member of the ECB's executive board. This is a guarantee that households will have access to their funds, businesses have access to financing, and governments to resources for vital services, even in the darkest of times. The Ukrainian banking system is a proof. It is stable, liquid, and profitable. Banks are able to serve customers during blackouts, support critical industries, and to be the backbone of the state. We have created a unique partnership among competitors. Banks have united for the sake of the country. The first time in autumn 2022, during the first blackouts, at the initiative of the NBU, we established a power banking network of branches of various banks to survive in the conditions of energy terror and to preserve uninterrupted services to the customers and to maintain confidence in the banking system under any conditions. The second time when banks signed memorandum on preferential lending for energy recovery. As a result, projects for the development of energy generation with a capacity of nearly 1.3 gigawatt and preservation of heating and energy with capacity of 434 megawatt have been financed. And this gives a significant synergy effect. Business lending has been growing for more than 2 years in a row. New hryvnia loans in September increased by 30% year-on-year. And for the first time since 2022, the penetration of lending increases, the quality is good, and the NPL ratio is at historical low of 25%. The next step for systemic cooperation is to support the defense industry. We are already working with government and banks on lending models for the sector. It's not just a standalone project. The banking system is a reliable partner. And this situation is not for granted. It's an achievement based on trust and responsibility. And it is important. We have to be responsible and very professional. When we talk about banking sector, I mean the taxation issue. And we have to understand the value of financial stability, because there is no compromise between stability and development. Today, financial stability, financial security, and defense are elements of the same system. Second factor. European integration is a strategic investment in sustainability. Moving towards the EU is not only a political choice, it's existential choice. It's a strategy of resilience on our way to the victory. EU accession is our vaccine against structural mergers and institutional slowdown and economic drought. Countries of Central and Eastern Europe that joined the EU in 2004 increased their labor productivity and GDP per capita by 10% even before the accession. And we are already on this path. Last week, the European Commission published the annual report on the enlargement of the European Union, and Ukraine received high marks for its progress. Despite the war, Ukraine is moving forward, implementing EU legislation, and eagerly awaiting the political conditions for opening negotiation clusters, having completed its homework on time. This is the moment that deserves our collective recognition. During the war, Ukraine and its team are doing what other countries have been doing in peacetime for years. You have to agree, this deserves applause. For the National Bank, this is also a matter of strategic importance. By the end of 2027, we envisage full alignment with EU regulation in the financial sector. Today, the equivalence of our prudential regulation in the banking sector is estimated at 78%, while before the war it was only 50%. And this is just one part of a much broader effort. EU accession covers all areas from finance to law, defense, institutional stability, and progress in each of these areas is not only about economic alignment, it's also about entering the European security area. As Christine Lagarde said, Europe must act decisively as a united community that takes greater control of its own destiny. Ukraine is already a part of this community. We are its outpost and partner in defending common values, strengthening economic stability and defense. The third factor, international aid. Enough and timely to survive. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine has received over $155 billion in financial aid. Thank you for this. But this is not charity. This is investment. Thanks to this, we are maintaining financial stability, avoiding monetary finance, increasing international reserves to nearly $50 billion and forecasting their growth. We have successfully passed 8 reviews with the IMF program, which doubles our country's previous record. And this is in the context of the full-scale war. We are currently negotiating a new program. The key issue is a sustainable financing mechanism, in particular through a reparation loan based on immobilized Russian assets principle. We are awaiting the EU's decision. The President of Ukraine, the government, the NBU, the entire Ukrainian team are focused on conveying the required arguments and achieving the results. We feel the support. We see the energy of our European partners, and we appreciate each decision and each effort. But I will put it simple. What I hear and see from really cautious central bankers, this is understanding that Ukraine is a defense asset of the European Union, its eastern border, and risk assessment of reparation loan should take this into account. Europe will be forged in crisis and will become the sum of the decisions we make to overcome them. These are the words of the economist Jean Monnet, who is known as the founding father of the European Union. Today, one of such decisions is a reparation loan, and it is in hands of the European Union. We in the NBU believe in the force of the Union, and we are waiting for positive decisions. And to finish, we will have difficult months ahead, but we have 3 things that hold the country. People who never give up, systems that keep working, and decisions that are made ahead of the blow, not after it. Energy is not only about megawatts, it's about believing in life. And I believe that we will survive. We have energy, the character, and we have Ukraine. Thank you for attention. Glory to Ukraine.
Я вас всіх вітаю. Я думаю, ви залишились тут для того, щоб дізнатися.
My greetings to all. I think you stay here in order to learn about the risks in economic sphere and what the 2026 is bringing to us. Maybe you want to know whether we'll have money, business operational, and what will happen to the economy. Today with us, the Deputy Finance Minister, Mr. Oleksandr Kava. This person has been working at the Ministry of Finance for a long time. With us, Andy Gunder, president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine, who knows very well about Ukrainian business. We also have the voice of European Business Association, Anna Derivianko, and Roman Vashchuk, who is finishing his term as the business ombudsman in Ukraine, who also knows a lot about state of Ukrainian business. So, maybe we'll start with money. Ministry of Finance. I see that you understand what we're going to ask you about every year. It's not clear till the end how the state expenditures be funded for the next year. I remember last time you were the deputy minister, advisor to the prime minister for the whole quarter. At the beginning of the year, we didn't know what would be with the money. So this time, is it more difficult now for us, or it's a regular situation? Thank you very much. I'm happy to participate in this event. Speaking about 2026, for the Ministry of Finance, in terms of planning national budget expenditures for the next year, this year is more difficult for us than 2025, because when we drafted a budget for 2025, we had a clear understanding in terms of covering the state budget deficit. We realized the situation in the United States because the new administration was supposed to take over, and for the previous administration we got necessary funding. Now the situation reminds us 2024, when many of our partners believed that 2024 had to be the war of the end to the war, and didn't rush to take decisions on funding Ukraine. If you remember, we entered the year when we had enough money by the end of February. Then, after European funding allowed us to our finance until mid-summer, and then at the end of spring, when the ex-administration in Washington solved the issue of funding Ukraine. Now the situation is somehow similar, because the deficit for next year is about $60 billion, which is not covered. And now we're working actively with our partners to get this funding. It's quite a complicated process, but we are optimistic, and we believe that the deficit problem will be resolved, and the repatriation loan will be realized at the expense of Russian frozen assets. Do I understand correctly that Ukraine facility was based on the position that the war would finish in June 2024? And when we talked to the delegation of the European Commission, we said, you see, now it's April 2024, it doesn't seem that the war is going to end. The answer was like this: we are setting up a mechanism, we want countries to get accustomed to it, and that we would make it bigger. And then we started talking about it, but I think now we are talking about setting up some new mechanisms. Yes, it's a work on setting up a new funding mechanism at the expense of Russian Federation frozen assets. This is, first of all, an issue, question to the European Union, and they have a discussion concerning Belgium, which is the major owner of Russian frozen assets. The lion's share of these assets are kept in Belgium. That's why we need the support of the Belgian government on this issue. But we have also talks with other countries of the EU. Unfortunately, the position of the United States changed concerning financial assistance to Ukraine. But European partners and other partners from G7 remain quite loyal and optimistic towards Ukraine and trying to help us to solve our problems. Also, a brief technical question about credits which European Investment Bank and EBRD get into Ukraine. This is a credit money. They require certain proof of certain guarantees or access from Ukraine to these recourses, and whether we can withstand such a tempo of cooperation when money is provided to us as a credit. On many programs, we find compromise with the European Investment Bank because it's a program of supporting both big national sectors of economy and municipal ones, because we must realize that besides the war in the East, we also have economic war. And if Ukrainian cities function more or less okay, then we would be able to finance some part of our state budget expenditures. It's not a secret that half of the state budget is funded by taxes and fees, and another half is funded at the expense of credits and grants from our partners. Therefore, we should not forget about those regions into which many IDPs moved. The economy there is functioning, and they generate not only various products, including military products, but also pay taxes, and we should not forget about it. So it's a positive answer. There will be certain credit resource for businesses. Speaking about Trump's administration, Andy, as a head of such organization which somehow depends on the policy of the U.S. government, I remember that the first days or weeks of Mr. Trump's presidency and that discussion in the Oval Office, there was even a view whether it won't be toxic for Ukraine to interact with the U.S. at all. I think that President Trump and in business, everything depends on the result. We see that today, after the hit that there is not enough energy, 91% of U.S. Chamber of Commerce members, companies, continue working in Ukraine. Not only continue working, but also developing their businesses. The week before the last, McDonald's opened the 50th restaurant in Kyiv. It was at the day when there was no electricity in Kyiv, and they continued developing their business. Why does business continue? Because there are conditions. If we look at 25 sectors of economy, one of the key ones against which Russia wanted to destroy was the banking sector. Even before the first missiles arrived on the 24th of February 2022, the attacks against the banking system were conducted, and thanks to Microsoft and other companies who managed to preserve the situation. Also, thanks to the governor of the National Bank, they managed to very quickly take out servers. If during the Second World War, key infrastructure was hidden underground, so this time it was the quickest way to send this to the cloud, because they managed to move the banking service into the cloud quickly, and the Russian missiles cannot hit the cloud. And this was done by Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. The banking sector is working excellently. Visa, MasterCard, it's important for the economy today. And we see when the sectors are prepared. They continue working, and this dialogue between business and authorities, I remember when Yatsenyuk was the prime minister, we had it, and now we continue the dialogue. In some sectors, it was more. In some sectors, it was less. It is less. In terms of energy, I was asked a lot of questions. What do we expect? Because now we know that there is a case against the minister. I think this transparency for business is important for business to understand that together business and the state should prepare for this. How much the business is suffering now from the shelling. I remember that in the Western Ukraine, American companies suffered from Russian missile. 54%. Every second company suffered certain problems and damage. McDonald's in Lukyanivka has been damaged 7 times, but they continue working. Last month I was in Mukachevo in Zakarpattia. There was one our company. 2 Russian missiles hit directly at night shift. There were 600 people. At 4:30, the alert was announced, and so two missiles hit. But thanks God, 600 people survived, and the business continues. I think that every second company suffered damage from Russian terror, from Russian missiles over the last 4 years. How did this hit influence, this attack, influence the development of U.S. business in Ukraine and support to you from the United States government to your companies in Ukraine? I think that companies which are working in Ukraine now are the best ambassadors of business which Ukraine have, because they are resilient, and this resilience inspires the others. In March, I was in Taipei in Taiwan. Our colleagues, U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Taiwan, asked us to tell them how the business functions during the full-fledged war, because in Taiwan they also are, their neighbor is preparing to potential invasion, and here they want to be prepared to that. That's why it's very important that business continues working and business believes in Ukraine.
Ну що, поговоримо тоді про європейців.
Now let's speak about Europeans, Anna. With the Americans we see, it's like within 1 week the position may change a number of times. With Europe, it's clearer. There is internationalization of our business, process of integration. What risks do your participants see now in terms of European integration? Thank you, Kirill. At the beginning, I would like to thank Arseniy, Yatsenyuk, and Danilo Lubkivsky for giving me an opportunity to participate in this discussion. Speaking about risks for European companies, I would identify 4 key risks which European companies face. The same goes for American and for Ukrainians. I think because all these challenges concern every entrepreneur in Ukraine. This is the issue of energy. And Arseniy has already thanked some way, as Andriy Pyshny thank people from the energy sector. I'm joining them because many people feel this titanic work which is being done in the energy sector, and people who maintain the electric supply in the country. So the price for energy is also important. Currently, the companies complain that electricity prices are higher already than in other countries, even in the neighboring one, which kills the competitiveness of Ukrainian producers in Ukraine. The second risks are people. First point is that there is a deficit of personnel. We cannot find people to hire them. There is not enough. The time which we need to close the vacancy is too long. And the second is about the amount of market, because some people left Ukraine, some people mobilized, some people are just hiding away, don't go out on the streets because of situation. So the market has shrinked substantially, especially this decision which concerns letting young people from 18 to 22 to live, allow them to leave the country. This provoked a deficit of labor and outflow of people from the market and shrinking of the consumer market in Ukraine. The third aspect is an issue of shadow. As far as we know, it's 500 billion hryvnias, the shadow market in Ukraine. So in some sectors we have figures from our businesses. And this shadow economy is formed at the expense of illegal traffic and counterfeit production of counterfeit products and not paying taxes from salaries and wages. And the fourth issue is the permanently changing legal environment because business needs for the situation to be understandable, forecastable, and manageable. Unfortunately, we cannot provide for this. So all this is discussed between businesses, European, American, and Ukrainian businesses. But nevertheless, we keep cautious optimism for 2026. In spite of all these issues, our companies continue working. Andy mentioned that 95% stay working in Ukraine. In our case, 99% companies, and I would like to say that there is about 1,000 companies who are members of association.
On the other hand, for in 2026, 77% of our members hope that their profits in hryvnias will grow. 55% of our companies hope that their dollar incomes will grow. 55% of companies are going to increase their businesses, and 20% of our companies are planning to make large-scale investments in our projects. All this optimism is possible if the security situation remains under control and if we manage to preserve the microfinancial and microeconomic stability. So obviously we do not envy people of the Ministry of Finance and the National Bank, because it's become very challenging to preserve this stability in view of the shortage of international assistance. But we wish them all the very best to make sure that macro financial stability stays on in Ukraine, and we will keep on working. Thank you, Anna. It's true that lowering rates for the industry will result in the increase of rates for household consumers. So this is a very dangerous situation, and floating the exchange rate also might have very challenging consequences. Mr. Vasychuk, so we are talking here about the war, about strikes, but time and time again, words like business climate, leveled playing field, and other related notions come to the fore. If we take a pulse of the situation which is supposed to defend the interests of businesses, what is your take on this? What are their problems, non-military, non-war related problems in this respect? Well, I would say that at the technical level, certain problems which hampered the work of companies, primarily Yatsenyuk system problems which regulates VAT in Ukraine, or problems related to other tax issues, like pending cases in the court of law and so on. In terms of those problems over the last half a year, they have been diminished due to the efforts of the tax authorities, which is aimed at respecting businesses and more efficient use of their automated systems. The system of inspections still is fraught with certain problems, and because it's aimed at finding an excuse to impose a fine or increase taxes. And also among the remaining problems is the problem of law enforcement bodies, where they are very eager to increase the number of criminal cases, no matter what. The early post-Soviet system gave us this hangover, and this basically hampers the work of businesses, irrespective of moratoriums for inspections and so on. Can we say that these systems cannot be changed rapidly? That is why there's a necessity to introduce moratoria. Well, but moratoriums are not grounded, because these inspections are not grounded. Who will come to you and say that we've come to you to carry out an ungrounded inspection? We rather should recall the spirit of the first 6 months following the beginning of the full-scale aggression, when the government was more supportive of businesses, and the other way around. But what we had afterwards is this normalization on the old foundation, as it were. But the foundation of wartime should result in a higher level of mutual understanding between businesses and the government. We can see that those who work not in the shadow, but in Ukraine, they demand that the government fight the shadow businesses. And we try to promote the dialogue between companies in this sector to direct people towards the light as opposed to shade. So resetting the customs services and taxation services should have been priority goals for the government. Well, we do hope that we'll have fewer cases of irregularities which lead to illegal enrichment of tax or customs authorities. Now let's speak about other challenges beyond winter 2026. This is a broad issue of business in Ukraine and the risks of recovery of Ukraine and so on. We're here at the Security Forum, and we should say that even before the full-scale invasion, we were very often at the very bottom of the list of countries in terms of business freedoms and financial freedoms. What's your take on the financial freedoms in Ukraine? We understand all the constraints of the wartime, but what's your vision of the creation of a market which would be characterized by higher financial level of financial freedoms in Ukraine. Now the priority for the country and for all Ukrainians is the security and defense sector. But at the same time, we want to create necessary preconditions for the recovery of the country after the war, because we would need a higher growth rate than other countries can afford. Unfortunately, for instance, in Mariupol, we lost half of our facilities producing steel, and because the enterprises there were ranking among the top ones in Ukraine, and they produced, each of the two produced more than 100 million tons of steel per year. It would be impossible to relaunch them within a year or so. So we have a surplus of iron ore, which we can export to the outside markets, but the added value of iron ore is much lower than that of steel. That's why setting up industrial parks, for instance, is one of the segments which the state finances quite considerably, even in spite of the hostilities. An increasing number of industrial parks are being created in the country, and the government is helping to compensate the costs for transportation and infrastructure to make sure that these industrial parks are operational and efficient. And there are several examples of industrial parks which are being developed very well despite the war. Unfortunately, these are about the sectors of low level of added value, but this is a good example showing that Ukraine can be attractive for direct foreign investments. We also invest in transportation infrastructure, primarily at the crossing points on the border with the EU and on the border between Ukraine and Moldova. We want to increase the number of points which unite Ukraine with the European Union, because we understand that once we become members of the EU, the more points of contact we'll have, the better for Ukraine and for our traffic and freedom of movement of commodities and people and finance. The first Euro railroad gauge was launched in Transcarpathia in Uzhhorod, and 50% of those costs were covered by the European Union through the relevant facility. So business agents of Uzhhorod now can send their cargoes to Europe without any transshipment, additional transshipment. We also are going to launch a similar project from the border to Lviv to enhance our transportation and communication infrastructure. Well, as regards our taxation policy, maybe there is a view that this is primarily a problem of administration rather than rates of taxation. Well, our position is such that we need to improve this system and to develop an approach which would focus on various factors adversely affecting businesses. It's very difficult sometimes to ensure a compromise here, because businesses are oriented towards profits, and businesses very often tend to avoid paying taxes. A lot of our companies relocated to Poland and to the Czech Republic, and we know the feedback from our Polish counterparts that very often the Ukrainian companies that relocated to their companies are seeking to avoid taxes. And when our Polish counterparts are being asked by Ukrainians how we can avoid paying taxes here, they're appalled by this, because for them paying taxes is sacrosanct. Well, we recall the cases of Pivovarsky, for instance, when the taxes are partially used for the financing of ports and so on, and that was a case which came to litigation because it was an irregularity. What about the European Business Association? If the war drags on, what would be your expectations? Can we create favorable conditions to attract foreign businesses to Ukraine? Well, we are monitoring the situation in Ukraine, but what is of key importance here is the rule of law. And here we have 3 P: prevent, publicize, and punish points. When there is a prevention, and when there's a social society which will detect those issues, and the government will punish for that, that would be much better. Businesses are not looking for privileges, they are looking for justice. If in October, when we are approached and we are told that there is a decision that for banking sector, the decision is to increase the tax by 50%. We believe this is unjust, unfair. There are companies that pay taxes and those who don't. We can see this way. We see that at restaurants we're sometimes being given 2 bills, one for the food and one for the liquor. Well, obviously this is a way to avoid paying taxes.
In supermarkets and various individual entrepreneurs, when there is drops excise duties, we counted 68 billion. Now this money is filling the budget. 68 billion you can take easily through excise duties concerning electronics, which is brought illegally, retail, in various sectors. And if there is a political will to take this money which exists in Ukraine, so for all to pay, because we see companies which are big ones, they pay, and the others avoid. So I think that this dialogue is very important, and we'll continue working on this because it's really important for the development of the economy and development of the country. For democracy to be strong, you need strong economy. I don't know what sectors do you believe more in. I'm happy to answer this question. I see that Roman has to switch off at 14:40. I will give him an opportunity to answer the question, and then I will speak after him. I just want to listen to Roman. Roman, I remember that a year ago, Analytical Center on the platform of economic revival showed that from the point of view of the economy, in terms of rule of law, in Ukraine, 55% of normality of even our Western neighbors from the point of view of rule of law. We have only half of the normality. Do you see any prospect in stabilizing this indicator, and what should be done? There need to be a reasonable deregulation of some things. What I'm going to do now is to fair interaction with the city of Lviv, where I'm now, so that part of the local self-government, the public servants were not under threat of criminal cases like private agents through incorrectly built procedures. This is the most dangerous in the area of construction works, both state and private firms. The regulation is such that it forces firms to declare the lower labor cost, to pay their salaries in envelopes, so to say, hidden payment under the table. So, and this happened for years. And same goes for many law enforcement officers, judges, and so on and so forth. And this money is not used, which had to be used for normal development, normal construction. But it says that practically in every contract in Ukraine, there might be a criminal case, either against businesses or those who ordered this work. So we see that 2/3 of the members of Confederation of Construction Businesses don't want to deal with the state authorities. So we have to do certain things, and these initiatives from businesses, like the staff for the regulation, the Ministry of Economy should work on this. Thank you, Roman. If you need to rush, you may go. About sectors, what do you believe in? In fact, sectors, what is on the surface, it's a defense industry and protection, defense of the state. Currently, this attracts the most attention, but there are certain comments on my behalf. When the war started in 2022, as a European Business Association, we opened exterritorial business unit in order to work with international business, which is yet not represented in Ukraine. And through this work, I see the evolution of changing of modes of businesses abroad and potential investors. What do we see? We see that business community divided into two groups. The first group, which already was present in Ukraine before the war, and the second group, which was not present and which is not present. So the first group stays in Ukraine. They continue participating in competition, invest money. They learned how to work in Ukraine under our conditions. And the second group, which was not present in Ukraine, unfortunately, is not rushing to enter Ukraine. And I think the key motivation for them would be definitely the end of war. If the war continues, it's hard to expect for many people to come here. On the other hand, if the war continues, the motivation could be the access to finances. This could be European funding or maybe structural funds of the European Union, various grant programs, because business needs either a market which would be able to absorb their products and services, or they need some other possibilities to fund their operations. If it does not exist, there is no motivation for business to come into our state. And when they hear about lack of rule of law, which Andriy and Roman mentioned, which lead to various surprises, so the wish to come into Ukraine diminishes. That's why we have to do everything possible to win the sympathy of those sides, to win their hearts and minds. And for this, we have to do what Andy said, to establish a full rule of law, not tolerate corruption, not to change rules of the game, to make it that law enforcement system to defend legal businesses. So a lot should be done. But also, the populistic decisions should not be taken, should be rejected, and neo-infantilistic policy should be rejected. And I think that if we need a new investment and investors in our country, we would have to do this, especially in view of our moving towards European Union. And here European integration should help us in order to put into proper order our regulatory field, which European Commission mentioned recently, who said that effective combating corruption would be the prerequisite for our successful move towards European Union. Thank you, Anna, for even populism bringing into the list of security risks. For populism, you need money. Populism demands money. If there is no money, it's very difficult to play with populism. Thank you. Thank you. I thank all the participants. And in conclusion, the question to you. You see a situation from very interesting points of view. Why does it make sense to struggle for this country? What prospects do you see here? On the one hand, it's quite a complicated question. I am motivated by work on making our country stronger, our people better living, and for us to become full-fledged members of European community. This brief answer to a very complicated question, because every project which you initiate and realize should be aimed at improving life of the citizens of Ukraine and make our economy more attractive for investment. And this inspires you to new projects, new ideas. I like the approach of the Ministry of Finance. Do you like it? Compared to previous years, Andriy? And there is a risk today to invest into Ukraine, but there is even bigger risk not to invest. And this is what Ukraine demonstrated, what Ukrainians showed during full-fledged invasion, when people thought that everything would fall apart. And this resilience inspires the whole world. And people want to be strong together with the Ukrainians. It inspires. And creation of the fund of the US and Ukraine, there are three baskets: minerals, energy, infrastructure. Clear projects are being searched for. The new chair, Kim Black, who's been appointed for this, is doing this. The main message is Ukraine open for business. And they say that ambassadors are those companies which already work in Ukraine, can show and demonstrate this. Thank you for calibrating our expectations concerning the risks next year. And with this, we finish this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, on behalf of Kyiv Security Forum, I want to thank the participants of both panels, both moderators. I want to thank you, those who attentively followed our work and used this opportunity to make further conclusions about energy and economic situation. Our emergency session has come to an end, but we continue our work and see you next time.